SonRise Project, Sunday Support Call Community. Good morning. Clearly, I am not Kelli. I am Dr. Vicki Johnson, and so grateful to have you with us today on Father's Day 2026. Welcome to our weekly SonRise Project call. We are happy that you're here and hope that in these next few moments that you can find solace and peace as we share and learn from one another in a safe space that's filled with love, compassion, and a mutual desire to heal our children, our families, and ourselves. God grant us the serenity to accept the things that we cannot change, the courage to change the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That is our serenity prayer that Kelli shares every week before we get into our powerful discussions here on the SonRise Project Sunday Support Call. Our guest today, I'm very excited to introduce to our community, is Derek Triplett. He is a Kingdom Change agent with several initiatives to help people live at full strength. He is an author, media personality, and a certified life coach. He has over 35 years of pastoral ministry leadership experience with over 27 years as a consecrated bishop. Today is actually his 40th preaching anniversary, so happy preaching anniversary to you. He is the founding pastor of a powerful dynamic ministry in Daytona Beach, Florida, Hope Fellowship Church, the Victory Center. He is the founder of Getting All Males Equipped, GAME, a male mentoring and development organization that helps to shape the minds of urban males so they learn to make good decisions, change negative behavior patterns, and build proper standards for effective living. He has written several powerful books, including When I Became a Man, A Perspective on Manhood, Life, and Relationships, Gifts to My Son, and Well Built, the 21 Indispensable Qualities of Manhood. His latest book is entitled Unsettling. He is the host of a weekly radio show called Be Even Better with Derek Triplett, and he is married to Luann Sorrell Triplett, the father of two, and the bonus father of two, all whom are young adults. So he fits right in with us. So welcome, Derek Triplett, Bishop Derek Triplett, and thank you for joining us on Father's Day 2026. We are so happy to have you here.
I am excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So grateful that you're here. And we know it's Sunday morning and your congregation is waiting for a powerful word from you this morning. So thank you for the sacrifice of joining our community before your Sunday service today. I want to get right into some questions because I know our community is going to have some questions for you, just based on your experience. So, how do you teach men and boys to dismantle, or how have you done this over the years? Because your body of work spans decades with Black men and boys. How are you teaching men and boys to dismantle old scripts, old narratives, old practices, if you will, and see emotional vulnerability as a core strength? I know that is something you demonstrate, is something you model, but can you share as we just kind of break the ice today, how are you doing that in your work in Daytona Beach, Florida, and beyond, actually?
Well, one of the things that we do with that is to, first of all, give them an opportunity to release their mentality in this way and to communicate it, to talk about how they think, how they feel, how they relate to the world, how they relate to themselves, how they relate to the opposite sex, what their worldview is, and really try to do a kind of flip the cone, so to speak, to do it very, very inductively, to let them get it out. And then I ask the question, so how's that working?
Mm.
So how's that working? How's that working as far as your goals and your objectives? How's that working in your relationships? How's that working internally? And in many cases, most cases, almost without fail, there's something that's not working, and it's tied back to uh, a bad input, a bad input. And we talk a lot in our groups about input, process, output. So let's look at your outputs. Let's look at the process you've been through. Well, where are the inputs? And then we get into, so who raised you? Who raised you? Who put those inputs in you? And how did it work for them? And once we can convince them that maybe by their own evaluation, that maybe this hasn't worked for me, or if it's worked for me, it hasn't worked for others that I affect. So it hasn't really, this me hasn't worked for my children, or this me hasn't worked for my parents, or this me hasn't worked on the job. So let's look at that and then say, okay, here's an alternative. Here's an alternative to perspective. Here's an alternative to self, because I think it really, really starts with getting people, males, to look at themselves and to say, is this me working? And then when it's not, or when they say it is, and then we argue and prove that it's not, then it gets us an opportunity to say, okay, let's try to replace that. Let's try to replace that. Let's not, because you can't tell a man to get rid of something without replacing it. And
That's
he's
good.
got
Say that
to,
again. Can you say
you
that
can't tell
again?
a man to get rid of something without replacing it. I'm not going, even if I'm on the negative, I'm not going to zero. I've got to have something that fills that void, something that fills that mentality, something that fills that mindset, because otherwise, if you're asking me to redefine myself without giving me tools for a new definition, then you've left me on zero, and that just doesn't work.
That is so good. That as a mom, and we have a lot of boy moms, mothers of sons in our community. I think that's important for us to know because for us, it's get rid of that. It's not working for you. That's no good.
Right.
But the piece that you just gave us, you can't take something without replacing it with something else, I think is a key takeaway from today. I want to go to something similar and related. I think is really appropriate that this week President Obama's library opened in Chicago. And that just felt like a collective infusion of joy
Yeah.
that we all needed,
Yeah.
especially Black men and
Yeah.
Black boys. And I thought it was so amazing the timing of the opening to be leading up to
Father's Day.
Father's Day and watching our forever First Lady, Michelle Obama, give her speech. And
Mhm.
when she said, Barack, look at me,
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought that was a moment. And the other moment is when he got emotional.
Hmm.
And he was trying so hard. He was like, no, I'm not going to
Yeah.
look at you. I'm going to look at the
Yeah.
ground. Right. How can men and boys shatter the mask of toughness? That was a powerful thing for me to watch. But from your perspective as an advocate, as a leader, as a Black man, and a father of sons, how can men and boys shatter the mask of toughness and again look at emotional vulnerability as a strength?
If I can look at it this, if I can look at this two ways and look at it generationally. So I talk about a little bit about this and when I became a man. Uh, Men of a certain age, say 40 and up, got to be tough. Men of a certain age, say 40 down, they were raised on being hard.
Mhm.
And so I got to be hard. That was the slogan of the 90s and the early 2000s. I got to be hard. And so I've argued that uh, that hard in our urban communities it's a lesser version of tough. It is a lesser version of tough, um, because hard is attitudinal. Hard is my disposition. How I talk, how I carry myself, the look on my face. Frowning for no reason. All of that. That's hard. Men 40 and up were tough in the sense of they were strong enough. They may not have been strong enough to be vulnerable, but they were strong enough to handle responsibility. And so there was a level of toughness, depending on how you define it, that was necessary. And there's a level of toughness that doesn't exist in the proverbial hardness. So, because we got a lot of hard young men that ain't tough at all. They're not tough at all. They're not able to have the strength and the stamina to meet their responsibilities and to have emotional control and to do all of that. But I think vulnerability is the next step beyond tough. And so if you look at it on a continuum, trying to be hard, then I'm trying to be tough, then I'm trying to be strong.
Wow.
And that's where we're trying to get to. I need to be strong. And a part of being strong is the ability to be strong enough to be vulnerable, the ability to be strong enough to have a level of mental, not only mental stamina, but mental skill. And a lot of times we are using toughness to hide inabilities. Sometimes we're using toughness in order to hide the lack of the ability to communicate, the lack of the ability to negotiate, the lack of the ability to really, really find common ground. If you compare, the energy and the vibe and the joy that we saw in the person that President Obama is, and then you compare it to the person who's in the White House now, there is a very distinct difference. And this person has to be tough and oppressive in order to show manhood. Whereas this person is able to not only achieve, not only have great character, not only execute and perform, not only communicate, but to earn the respect of his wife to a level that on international TV, she knew she had the space to say to the former president of the United States, who this building is in honor of him, but to say to her husband, you got to look at me. You got to look at me, and to walk in that level of power. That's built. That's built from a strong man, not necessarily a tough man, and definitely not a hard man, but that's built from a strong man who, when I looked at that, I felt all the joy. When I looked at her speech and when she started relating to him, my first thought was, man, you got to earn that. You got to earn that. You don't get that as a platitude. You don't get that as a performance for the moment. The way she spoke of her husband, you got to earn that. And you don't earn that without the heart and the skills and the ability to be strong enough to be vulnerable, strong enough to be sensitive, strong enough to be attentive, and strong enough to be self-aware regardless of your surroundings, and self-assured regardless of your surroundings. Because you got to think about this. Politically, we had issues, at least I did, in some cases, had issues with President Obama because he is so much of a centrist. And I'm saying, they don't want to be bipartisan with us, skip them and this, but that's not who he is. And he went to the highest office in the world and had developed a character that he could stick with. That's amazing. That's strength. And to be able to be self-aware and self-assured enough to just be you within the context of this office, that's strength. And as she talked about, to have people coming at you at the level that they came at him, and for her to make the statement, we never expected you to lower yourself. It never crossed our minds that you were going to break. You earned that. You earned that through mental stamina. You earned that. I was sharing with a group of men recently on the subject of emotional control. And one of the things I asked them is, how are you when you don't get your way?
Mm.
You know, how are you when you get offended? How are you when you feel disrespected? Are you strong enough to handle that? Um, how are you when you have to accept that at that moment you're gonna take an L? You're gonna take an L at that moment, and you got to accept it. You could feel the room. It was about 40 men. They were fathers of children at this elementary school that we deal with, and you could feel the room getting tense. But Dr. Vicky, this is the one that got him. Um, how are you when you have to be an ex against your will, and that room got tight? The room, it's like you don't want to be an ex, but she's done. And how do you take that? Do you have the emotional control to handle crisis? And it got fun. It got fun.
Uh, so much packed in there, so much to unpack, so much packed. You talked about how that kind of connection between she and her husband had to be built.
Mhm.
That kind of trust and safety had to be cultivated and nourished. And many parents, moms, like on this call, deeply want to support their sons and daughters, but often hit a wall of silence or withdrawal when things get tough, when things get tight, when it calls for vulnerability. Oh, that's just my mom. She doesn't know what she's talking about.
Mhm.
Can you speak to us as parents to help us understand better how we can? You said earn, like that had to be earned. And I
Mhm.
know I'll speak for me, as mom, it's like, I'm your mother. I
Right.
I earn the right to say blah 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 blah
Right.
blah 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 blah. How do we build that connection though? Strengthen that connection because I think that is a gap
Yeah.
that we show up every week to strengthen our muscles to build that bridge. Like it was so much that you said in there. That is where I really want to
Right.
focus on. Can you talk to us as parents, as mothers, as fathers? Because some fathers may listen to this later.
Yeah.
How can that connection be strengthened and built? What can we do? Because we want to fix it. And
Yeah.
a lot of our children are young adults, so they don't want our help.
Right.
The way we
Right.
want to give it, and then I heard you talk about the tension in the room when you were asking those questions. So I'll stop there so you can kind of speak to what should our response or what are some tools to help us understand better how to navigate that space because it's very real.
It's very real. I'll kind of preface my statement by saying this. My gift in my writing and my speaking on parenting and men and that type of thing, my gift is really simple, is I take the things that I've experienced and the things that I've observed, and then I try to pull out universal principles. So here are the universal principles that can work so that things aren't as parochial, because what works in one home does not necessarily work in another home. With that said, there are a couple of very, very personal experiences that I'm hoping to pull out some universal truth when it comes to the question you've asked. One, it is very, very difficult. It is a difficult thing. And let me just say this. It is difficult with two parents, two involved parents, whether they're both in the house or not. It's very difficult at certain stages with two involved parents. It's even more difficult with a single parent, and I understand that. And the reason I put that out there is because there was a balance that was required even in my own evolution as a dad. Because one of the things that we got to remember is that while we're parenting, we're also evolving as people. And it's not just that you're not getting the child that you had at 8, you're not getting that same child at 14, but they're also not getting the same parent. And sometimes if we don't grow, then it hinders our relationship to navigate those difficult times of development and progress. I will say through the teen years, the number one thing that you've got to protect is open communication. And they're not going to talk a lot, but whenever they do talk, you got to make sure that they want to talk to you. And you got to wait on that, and you've got to be attentive, and you can watch. We had a situation. My daughter's the oldest, and I remember she was very vulnerable. She must have been 8th grade or something, very vulnerable in coming to tell me something. And as a dad, it was involving a little boy, and that triggered something in me. And as a dad, I went off. But I'm grateful because her mom said to me, "You got work to do because your daughter says she's never telling you anything again." And so I knew at that time I couldn't afford that. And I had to literally, it was a year of working to reestablish that line of communication. It was a year of showing that I could hear without reacting. It was a year of showing that that I wouldn't be judgmental on certain things. And I remember the day I graduated. We were sitting in the car, and she told me something, and I responded in a way that I knew would be appropriate. And so I looked at her. I said, "Hey, Destiny, I did good, didn't I?" She said, "Yeah, Daddy, you did good. You did good." And so we've been fine ever since. We've been fine ever since. Um, un- but then there was a period, maybe about 4 years ago, and she's now, you know, Destiny is 36 now. So there was a period about 4 years ago where I demanded information because she was like, "I don't have to tell you that." Yeah, yeah. And so then I had to take a very, 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 very deep breath because at that age, 20s, 30s, they, um, it's a different situation because they need you, but no longer have to obey you.
Mhm.
And so, and a lot of times as parents of adults, we confuse honor with obedience. And
Can you talk about that a little more?
um, we define as honoring your father and your mother as doing what your mother and father say all the time. And so we feel disrespected and dishonored if they don't do what we say.
Mhm.
And they can honor us without obeying us at that time. But the trick part about it is that they go and make their own decision, and then you still got to be willing to help them pick up the pieces when it all crashes without telling them I told you so. And if you had just listened to me and all of that will ultimately be said, but it'll be said by them and not by you. And you may not get that affirmation as fast as you think you deserve it or as fast as you think you want it, but it will come across. But it is difficult. Parenting adults is tough. I thought parenting teenagers was tough. Parenting adults is rough, but you gotta keep the line of communication open. You've got to be able, because if they stop talking to you, it's a wrap.
Mm.
It is a wrap. And so the biggest thing is to protect that line of communication. And they know who you are, they know what you stand for, they know when they have uh, not lived up to what you stood for. But for you to also be there to say, hey, you can still talk to me even when we disagree. That's tough. Now, the challenge with sons is you've got to try to help save them from outcomes
Yes.
because they're aggressively making decisions and in many cases ill-equipped to make the decisions. I talk a lot about, you know, can you control your emotions? Can you critically think? And can you take a punch? And when I say take a punch, that is, metaphoric for can you get hit and not fall apart?
Mm.
Can you think? Can you effectively communicate what you're thinking? And I don't think we either in a um, and if you're raised where kids don't talk, then they'll never be able to communicate what they're thinking. And for boys, have I trained you to communicate in crisis? Have I trained you when you're in crisis mode? Can you still effectively communicate? And that's important at a police stop. That's important in a relationship. That's important. So can you critically think? Can you control your emotions in crisis? Can you still think you got stress in your chest, but can you still think? Can you still regulate your emotions? Can you still communicate? And if you have to take an L at that moment, can you still handle it?
That is so good. Thank you for that. Um, if there are any questions in the community, you can come off mute. If you're on the phone, you can hit *6. I want to just open up the way for questions. Don't want to wait until the end. You can come off mute if you have a question. If not, I'm going to keep talking because this is so good, so powerful. But just come off mute if you have a question. You can unmute yourself and ask a question. So there are, like I said, a lot of moms on the call. And for some, raising their sons, supporting young adult sons, etc., without a consistent, solid father figure in the space, right? How can we as mothers intentionally build, a healthy, supportive male village around our sons and our daughters? What does that look like?
Well, a couple things, even before I go there, when you don't have a consistent male role model within your village, maybe it's great to concentrate on skill development rather than images. So I don't have the image, I don't have the guy, I don't have the guy, but I got a checklist of skills and character traits that I want to develop in my son. And so if I don't have the image, that's one of the reasons I wrote uh, the 21 indispensable qualities of manhood, well built, that book, because there are 21 traits that even if I don't have the image, I can teach myself as a man or a mom can just kind of walk through this checklist. These are the traits that I want to get into my son. And the genesis of the book was these 21 things by 21. These are the things that if I can get these things and if I can get uh, a proper sense of self-awareness. That's one of them. That I get, this whole issue of identity, because it is tough being a man when you're not self-assured.
Yeah.
It is tough being a man, and it's tough being a male, middle school, high school, when you're developing that identity and you're going through the process of becoming. That is a tough, tough, tough process. But ultimately, that identity development is important. A My ability to have the right perspective of women. How are we coming out of this house? How are we going to look at women? Coming out of this house, how are we going to look at money? Coming out of this house, how are we going to look at power? Coming out of, it just goes down. And for the men in the book, there is at the end of each little chapter, there is an identity statement that is tied to that particular characteristic. And the hope was that if everybody would do each identity statement, then I've got 21 mantras that I've decided on who I am and who I want to be, and to be able to say, okay, let me refer to this so that I can continue to reinforce it. So one thing is to focus on traits and characteristics and not necessarily in a human image. The other thing is to mine your family, scour your family, scour your if your son is athletic or in music or what have you, make sure that you're not just dropping them off on that. Because you want to, just because I can coach basketball doesn't mean I can coach manhood. Just because I can coach swimming doesn't mean I can coach manhood. And what we may have to do in many cases is get pieces from different men in our family. Okay. My dad may have taught him how to critically think. His coach may have taught him how to have physical and emotional endurance. His uncle may have taught him financial literacy. But if you set a path of outputs that you want to achieve, then you start finding where you can get those inputs from. A lot of times we just try to do it organically. I just want to put the right male in front of him. Okay, what do you want that male to do? What are the traits? What are the characteristics that you want that to happen so that you get the outputs that you need?
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
that. There's a question in the chat.
Okay.
How can we encourage our boys to honor who they were created to be rather than hiding their best self? You just talked about identity.
Yeah.
So can you go into that a little further and also share at the end of that, like how we as community members can purchase your books, especially that
Okay.
well built, the 21 indispensable qualities of manhood?
It is one of the things we have to remember as parents, is who you see they will ultimately be is not who they are today.
Mm.
And we're looking for the cake to be baked and finished and ready to be served, plated and ready to be served. And the cake is still being mixed, And so you're telling your son, you know, you are a chocolate cake. That's who you are. I need you to honor yourself as a chocolate cake. And your son is feeling right now, I'm flour and sugar and baking powder and all this stuff that I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. And what a lot of times we have to keep speaking into our children, especially our sons, and giving them what God has created, but in many cases not forcing it on them.
Mm.
You know, not to be preachy. Um, there was Luke seems to intimate that there was a whole bunch of stuff that the angel told Mary about her son Jesus that she just kept. She just kept. Because do you really get to develop into the person that you need to be if you're told that you're going to be the Messiah? Or maybe I got to keep that, continue to pray about that, continue to guide his path, but also let his stepfather teach him how to be a carpenter and just let him do, because ultimately God's going to do all of that stuff as he's developing. And I got to keep praying about it. And I got to keep, having guardrails, but I can't keep necessarily telling you who you are when you're not ready to receive it. And maybe I just want to be a kid right now. Okay, I'm 11. you know, can I be 11? And I understand that personally. My son Donovan is a phenomenal, phenomenal, phenomenal young man. His career is through the roof. He's special. And I remember when he was a toddler, the Lord showed me that he was going to be really special, that he was going to be really, really special. I woke up from a dream, called his mom, and here's what God, he's going to be, and uh, and then I watched the enemy try to take his life twice, once as an infant and once as a toddler. But I didn't press him on that. I knew it. I kept it. We navigated and guided his life, and uh, uh, but just kept talking to God about it, because sometimes your kids aren't ready to process what you already know. They're just not ready to process what you already know, and so you just got to keep, and then you'll see it evolve, and then all of a sudden, when the time comes, uh, they'll know. You know,
That's good.
they'll know.
That's good. I have another question for you because I want to get it in. I know we're on tight time. Not all men are intentional and self-aware. This is coming from the chat. Not all men are intentional and self-aware in their parenting style and actions. So the question is, how do you communicate with men who avoid accountability and judgment when it comes to raising their boys?
That's tough. It's tough depending on who they were raised by, because if they were raised, if if they were raised by the wrong person and they're hearing the wrong voice, then as a female, you don't tell me how to raise my son. Which is utterly, utterly, utterly ridiculous. The other tough part is you're asking a man to self-correct in order to not have a negative effect on his son. And if I'm not in a relationship with you where I can take your critique, especially if we've got other residual issues, if this is a romantic situation that broke and all of that, and I'm not hearing you, and I'm not hearing you about our son either. And so one of the things that I think is important is parents have to always be adults. We don't get the privilege of
We can't be
being.
petty.
We can't be petty. We cannot be petty. And we don't get the privilege of being childish with our partner or ex-partner when our child is at stake.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that I need to receive, that I'm not ready to receive, You need to go talk to God about it so that I can be open to receive it. Because the old sales thing, back in the day, they would say, you know, if the shade is down, it doesn't matter what you say. You got to get the shade up. And so if they're not trying to hear you, it doesn't matter how valuable what you have to say is. You got to get to the point. Can we do this together? Can we do this together? Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Um, if a man does not view men and women as equal, then they definitely don't view the male and the female as co-equal parenting a son. So if I've got gender equality issues, then I'm not going to listen to you. If when it comes to my son, but if we could only get through our skulls that God, if God created two parents, then the child needs two parents. So even regardless of the gender of the child needs both perspectives. My children wouldn't have turned out how they have turned out if they had just had me. They would. I'm a great dad. It's the best thing I do. But they wouldn't have turned out this way. We needed the balance. There was stuff that I don't bring to the table that their mom does. There's stuff and we've got to accept that. So we can't get locked into this gender thing of I, the man, am the only person who gets to speak into the life of my son.
So let me ask you this because now the woman in me is coming forward asking for insight from you as a man, father, and male. What can we as mothers and women do then when that battle exists, right? I hear what you're saying. When that battle, that push and pull, that tug of war exists between co-parents
Right.
and the mother has pretty much, the majority
Mhm.
of proximity. I'll say it
Right.
that way. What's a tip for us as moms to navigate that battle in a way that supports our child?
It's a great question. It's a tough question. I think my answer is if you can agree, if you can agree on outcome, it's easier to agree on the diversity of the process. So what I mean by that is, okay, let's not deal with the how, your perspective, my perspective. Can we agree on how we want our son to turn out? Can we start there? Can we both agree on how we want our child to turn out? Because in some of the work that I do, parents don't even agree on that, and they live in the same house. I work with an elementary school, and and um, the father is offended that the mother wants the child to be studious because the father wants him to be a replica of him, and he wasn't studious. So every father wants to see a vestiges of himself in his son. So if he wasn't studious, then he doesn't want his son to be a nerd. So he won't support educational pursuits at the level that the mom does because that's not his thing. He, if he's, if he's a thug, he wants his 7-year-old to be a thug. I see it every day, and I hate to use those terms. I hate to use those terms, but I see it every day. If the two parents can come to an agreement on how you want the outcome, okay, we can't talk about this right now. Send me an email on how you want our son to turn out. I'll send you an email on how I believe I want our son. And then we'll bring those two things together and see what the best merger of that is. And if we can agree on that, if we can agree on the destination for our son, then let's now work on agreeing on the path and the pathology.
Thank you. Thank you so
Start
much.
there.
Yeah, thank you so much. In the chat, there's a comment that says, "My God, you are helping me today." So
Praise
thank
God.
you. Thank you for being here. How can we get your books? I do have a couple more questions, but
Okay.
I don't want to miss. How can our community members get your book?
DerekTriplett.com. Derek Triplett.
DerekTriplett.com.
Yeah.
Uh,
DerekTriplett.com.
DerekTriplett.com is where you can purchase the books. It is Father's Day, and so I want to come toward the end of our call and talk about fathers for a moment. You know, Father's Day, this can bring up a lot of mixed emotions for people. Some on the call don't have their dads anymore. For the men on the call or the sons we love who are carrying father wounds, right? Unresolved issues with their own fathers. What is a first step toward healing so that that pain isn't passed down or given to others? What's one step that we as a community member can do so that we don't pass down the pain of our father wounds if we have them?
You've already answered the question. The first step is to decide I don't want to pass it down.
Hmm.
That's so if I can decide, you know what? I don't want this to go another generation. I don't want to pass this down. Sometimes, sometimes the desire has to be big enough to make a decision. If the desire is not big enough to make a decision, then we'll continue certain things and there'll be all kinds of stuff that we pass down. You have to decide that I want to heal because I don't want to pass this down. I just don't want this to go. I was texting with someone yesterday who recently lost their father, and I knew this would be, she's a daddy's girl. I knew this would be a tough time. And I just kind of continued to check on her. And I kept saying, hey, make it a joyful day of remembrance and not just a day of sadness and the like. On the flip side, quick story, my mom, uh, my grandfather was my grandfather when he was an alcoholic. God rest his soul. When he was an alcoholic, he was a very very violent husband and violent dad. And my mom is the oldest of nine. In the last probably 10 years of his life, when all the kids are grown and all the kids, all the kids got kids and everything, in the last 10 years of his life, the Lord saved him and he changed. We're sitting in my grandfather's funeral. I'm sitting next to my grandmother, and we're sitting in my grandfather's funeral, and everybody's going to the podium talking about how great Deacon Moore was, just how wonderful of a man he was. And all of my aunts and uncles, save one, my youngest aunt, all my aunts and uncles are sitting there getting angrier and angrier and angrier because they're like these church people putting on the performance. We got this happen to us when we were growing, this happened to us. And I'm sitting there. And so I go give remarks and I address the tension in the room. And I said something to the effect, here's the problem. There are two groups of people in here that experienced two different versions of him. And both of them were very, very real. I said, those of you who never got to experience the good version, aunts, uncles, you never got to experience the good version of him. I'm going to need you to be okay with the people who did. And the reason that my mom got an opportunity in the last several years of his life to experience the good version of him is because she chose to forgive him. And forgiveness ushered in a new relationship. I'm asking people, take the opportunity to forgive. Take the opportunity and recognize that you may never get the benefit of having a good father. He's gone already, but take the opportunity to forgive and release yourself so that you do not intentionally or unintentionally pass down that pain. Because here it is, no matter how you try to keep it in, it's going to leak. No matter how much you try to protect it, it's going to leak in a lot of different ways. And so take that opportunity to heal, because you don't want to pass it down.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
That's a perfect way to close out today's call. Forgiveness ushers in a new relationship. Unforgiveness always leaks. So take the opportunity to give the gift to yourself of forgiveness when it comes to father wounds. I'm going to say your father or the father of your children.
Right.
Operate in forgiveness and move through this day with joy and gratitude. Bishop Derek Triplett, thank you so much. Again, community, you can purchase his books at derektriplett.com. It's in the comments. DEREK, Triplett, TRIPLETT.com. Thank you again. Can you close us with prayer today?
Absolutely. And thank you all for the invitation. To you, Dr. Vicky, to you, Dr. D. Thank you so much for the invitation. Let's pray together. Father, thank you for this opportunity to share. I personally just say thank you sincerely for this opportunity to share. Thank you for the things that you have done among us on this call. And I pray, Father, for every parent. And I pray, oh God, for every child affected, adults, adolescents, regardless of age. Father, that you would strengthen our families, strengthen our households. It is out of our homes, out of our households that we send people into the world. And Father, we need better people in the world. And so we need better households and better families. Bless now. Thank you for this movement. Thank you for it, and continue to bless it and expand it. Thank you for its leadership. We ask, oh God, that today would not be a day of heartache or heartbreak, residue of old feelings, but wherever we have to, we'll choose joy today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. We're going to choose joy. The parent partner company for the SonRise Project is the House of Joy. So go forward into the rest of this day with joy. Happy Father's Day, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Thank you again for the sacrifice, Bishop Triplett. And we'll see you all again on next Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have a powerful day. Bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.